Ladies and gentlemen, we're live here on the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. If you're watching this interview, you know I just lied right now. We're definitely not live, but we do have a very vastly important guest here. Lyndsey, there's so many things that are going on in the WNBA right now. Also, just wanted to kind of figure out like what title should I fully address you by in terms of make sure I get them all in at the same time.
Well, yeah, I write for The Athletic. I write about the WNBA women's basketball for The Athletic, but also Just Women's Sports. Started doing that at the start of the WNBA season this year, and really had a lot of fun. Put out some great content, and I'm also have a book coming out in a month. It's less than a month, called Hail Mary: The Rise and Fall of the National Women's Football League, with a co-author, Brittany De La Creta.
So you talk about the National Women's Football League. I actually used to work for a team called the Houston Energy, which is down here, and they're a professional women's team led by Brian Wiggins. Also, I have two things I wanted you to do. Can you give me a glimpse of like how Just Women's Sports got started, your involvement with it, and what's the direction that you guys see it going overall? And then on top of that, like give me a little bit more about your book and tell people where they can buy it.
Yeah, so Just Women's Sports, I got pulled on because my former editor at The Athletic WNBA, Hannah Witham, she left to go become the managing editor of Just Women's Sports back in February, I want to say. And we had always stayed in touch. We had a really great working relationship, and we're friends. And she kept saying, I don't want this to be the last time we work together, when she left The Athletic. And then ahead of the WNBA season this year, she wanted to expand. One of her goals was to expand Just Women's Sports, women's basketball, and WNBA coverage. And she asked me if I'd like to come on and help out with that. And I said, yes, of course.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's how I was brought on. I'm not really sure about the backstory. I know that it's being funded in part by a lot of current athletes right now. Enrique Ogunbowale being one of them, Elena Deladon being another. And I know some NBA players are in there. It was started by a former soccer player called Haley. Her name is Haley Rosen, and so she sort of started it, and then it kept growing and growing, and now you have all these current professional athletes contributing money to the growth of the site. And the vision is to just be. I don't want to make the comparison and be like the ESPN of women's sports, but that's kind of like. I think what the goal is to just give exclusive content and coverage to women's sports, and they deserve.
No doubt about that, especially considering we live in a time where, I don't know how many more embarrassing type features you can read about. We just recently that feature about how the NCAA had the meeting where they're trying to figure out if they should have the women's and the men's Final Four together for basketball in the same location. And it's like, wow, it took us to the year 2021 to piece that piece of common sense together about like maybe we can cut the cost of the tournament and have some of the most important games in the tournament be on the same TV network. What a concept. And then on top of that, the article that came out about how college women's basketball is being underserved and they're missing out on money. The WNBA in the pandemic being one of the few sports that had its ratings increase as the season went along, and then of course the WNBA finals having one of its highest rated rates ever. And we segue into the WNBA. We can sit here and we can talk about how women's sports is just kind of not appreciated for the level of the level of quality basketball that it is. But we are here for the WNBA finals. We've gotten to the semifinals, and you mentioned it before we started this interview about how your picks went a little bit sideways last night. A massive upset. The Connecticut Sun fall to the Chicago Sky, and Candace Parker is in the WNBA finals. You can see the emotion on her face. It's all over the WNBA social medias. You can definitely see a team that, as the season wore on, they had their ups and their downs consistently throughout the course of the season, but they came up clutch in the WNBA semifinals when they were quote-unquote like outmatched. They were going up against the reigning WNBA MVP in Jaquel Jones. Can you tell me how it kind of all fell apart for the Connecticut Sun and really what went right for the Chicago Sky?
Yeah, I've been talking about this with other people in the WNBA circles, right? Because I don't know. I kept waiting for the Sun to kind of do what the Sun did
Right.
the last month and a half of the season, which was dominate the teams in the league and go on a extended win streak from August 14th on. They hadn't lost a game, and they had to double bye in the playoffs. I wondered how that double bye would affect them, but as well as they were playing, especially being dominating on defense the way they were holding opponents on an average of 69 points per game. Um, it was said on the broadcast last night by Rebecca Lobo that out of all the matchups that they could have had in the semifinal round, Chicago was the worst to face because of Chicago's length matched up with their length, and they couldn't just impose their defensive will on Chicago the way they had with other teams, it seemed. But also with Alyssa Thomas back, which is a great thing for her to have come back.
Killed it in game 2. Absolutely dominated that game too.
I think it threw off the chemistry that had been there and had been established, especially during that last stretch of month and a half of the season that Connecticut was playing so well. And it just seemed to throw the chemistry off, and the Sun never seemed to really get into any sort of rhythm offensively at all. And so you wonder how much that played a part. Breann January not playing last night was a huge loss for them. They definitely needed her. Jasmine Thomas just wasn't really able to get them in their offensive flow. So Chicago deserves all the credit. They were hitting their shots. They were playing smart basketball. They were playing incredible defense. And then you have Candace Parker, who everybody else was sort of rallying around, and Chicago was 1-8, I believe, without her. So you could see what she brings to that team. Azrae Stevens had a great game. They had all these other pieces stepping up. Kalia Copper was an incredible X factor. It just they are riding the wave right now, and they're in the finals.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And it's really impressive to see. And we were talking about it beforehand about how it's important that these upsets happen in the course of the WNBA, because the Connecticut Sun, like you said, you talk about all the way back to August, not losing a game, insane win streak to get to the playoffs, get the double bye, and then of course all the sports cliches about getting that first round bye. And in the case of the WNBA, it's like a double poison pill in some cases, where like you get too much rest and you kind of forget how everything is going, while the Chicago Sky had to like fight and scrap to get to the opportunity to play against the Connecticut Sun. So when they played for the first time, they were all tuned up. But it was astounding to see both sides of the bracket have really competitive games, because you thought the Sun and you thought the Aces would just go out here and kind of run past it, especially with the Seattle Storm getting moved out of the way with Breanna Stewart going down in what really we can argue is the most disappointing factor going into the WNBA Finals. But I will say, if there was one year to get a season-ending injury, Breanna Stewart picked, not picked one, but has a good one here, has the kid on the way, has all these gold medals that she's got to shine up, kind of stuff like that, has the WNBA championship, the EuroLeague championship, almost perfect year, almost went back-to-back on the championships if it would have shook out that way. But we move to the other side of the bracket here. The Aces and the Mercury are playing each other, and some of the biggest names in all of the WNBA. Of course, the rise of Liz Cambage, which has been massively popular, from her modeling to what she does on social media. The article that she wrote in the Players Tribune all those years ago about how she fought with her anxiety to really maintain her sanity, essentially, when she was starting out her WNBA career. Her being possibly the second best center in the world of in the world of women's basketball, and having to go up against, Houston's own Brittany Griner out there, who is, you want to talk about impeccable passing. Impeccable passing out of the double team, always finding the wide open shooter. And guess what? One of her wide open shooters just so happens to be one of the best to ever do it, in Diana Taurasi, and she's been showing why they call her the White Mamba and why she was in Space Jam 2. The Mercury seem like they have all the momentum in this playoff series versus the Aces. How are you feeling about it and what you've been seeing?
Yeah, you just said it. The Mercury had all the momentum, and that's why not just me, but other people picked them to close out the series last night, because they just seemed to be having their way with the Aces. But Asia Wilson was pretty much like, no, that's not
really though, no, straight up.
She got back in her groove. She was They were running the offense through her. She wanted the ball. She was getting the ball. She scored 15 points last night. But also, they just had a more well-rounded game, and it seemed they kind of had shaken the cobwebs off that they had for some reason in this series. And Phoenix did not shoot well last night. They didn't play like how they've been playing in the previous 3 games. Brittany Griner was off, surprisingly. She's been on with that elbow jumper from the lane. Just seemed like she couldn't miss, and she was missing that last night. She was missing little chip-ins underneath the basket, and so she just didn't seem like she was in her flow to me. But, that's how it goes some nights. And now we get the game 5 on Friday night, and it's,
going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Well, to this point, to get to the finals. And, yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. I think a lot of people are thinking the Aces look like themselves now, and so they're probably going to pull it out. But I'm not so sure. I kind of feel like if Phoenix has that type of game that they've had the previous 3 games, and if the Aces are playing well, we could see a really awesome back and forth game.
And it's wild to see the kind of basically the super team that the Aces have built in the course of this season with Gray, Cambage, and then of course formerly reigning last year's WNBA MVP and A'ja Wilson, who burst onto the scene like nobody's business, really took her game to like a whole nother level. We saw her look amazing at South Carolina, but it seems like in the WNBA she's done even more to establish herself as a threat on a regular basis. But how are you feeling about the in terms of the strategy that was used initially to combat Brittany Griner? And I'm assuming the reason for Liz Cambage's like weird minutes is because of the COVID situation and her cardio and stuff like that. But how are you feeling about? Early on we saw them throwing the double team essentially, right? Because they weren't starting Liz. Essentially. They threw the double team. Brittany had to find a wide open. Brittany had to find a shooter on the perimeter, and it just so happened to be Diana Taurasi. It was a couple other players that contributed as well. But how'd you feel about the strategy and how it's kind of advanced throughout the course of this in this series?
I thought the Aces' defensive strategy was the right strategy, right? Like trying to take Brittany Griner out of. You like you said it. You have Diana Taurasi, you have Brittany Griner, and you have Skylar Diggins-Smith. So you throw everybody at everybody. You got to pick 1 or 2 players that you can try to take out of the game, and then have that other player, risk the other player beating you or the other 2 players beating you. And they focused on Griner, like you mentioned from the top of this, that she's just been incredible at seeing the floor, right? So even when they hit double or triple team, she sees the floor, she gets the ball out, right. She finds, and that's kind of what's been killing the Aces. But also, Cambage hasn't played her best defense on Griner. She wasn't getting out on her on the elbow. She wasn't contesting those shots. Griner was kind of having her way in the lane, and I think that was the difference last night. Cambage seemed to have a little bit more energy to her. She played better defense. They were able to disrupt Griner, and then if you look at the scoring with the Mercury, there was nobody who hit 20 points when the past few games you had. Right. Multiple players hit 20 or above points. So they just didn't have enough offensive power last night. And the Aces, like I said, they look like their old selves, where they led the league in scoring and were an offensive juggernaut.
So with all this information that you have, and of course you have half of the finals set, who would you rather see the Sky play in the finals? Which one's going to be the most interesting? Which one is going to be which of these 2 is going to be the best matchup in the WNBA finals, in your opinion?
Well, so both kind of have compelling storylines. If you have Phoenix and Chicago, you go back to the 2014 WNBA finals when those 2 last met in the finals, and Phoenix swept them 3-0. So there's that storyline, right? You have a rematch of these 2 teams. Courtney Vandersloot was on that team at that time. She was on Chicago, and Diana Taurasi and Griner, obviously. So you kind of have that redemption story, I guess.
And the connection that Skylar and Candace kind of have with each other in a lot of people's minds. So, because they I don't know. I grew up and the two biggest women's basketball players when I was like in high school were Candace Parker and Skylar Diggins, and then of course like Skylar signed with like J-Rock Sports Agency and all that kind of stuff like that. So they were the forefront because they were the ones that ESPN was like pushing. So I always find it interesting. It's like they always kind of find their way like back to each other in some way, shape, or form. So it'd be interesting to see them face each other in the WNBA finals.
Yeah, so you have multiple storylines. And then the other matchup with the Aces and the Sky, you go back to that Hamby Heave, right? The Erica Hamby who hit that Vandersloot turnover, in 2019 playoffs. I think it was the semifinals. So you have that storyline. If those two meet again, that's going to come up. So those are just some of the storylines for the matchups. But when you get down to the basketball sense of it, I think either matchup would be fun to watch. I think the Mercury Sky with just their big three and the Mercury's big three, and then with the Aces, I could see a great matchup as well. So I don't really have anybody that I'm like, oh, I'd rather have this team over this team. I think what we're gonna get is a really good finals, no matter what.
And I'll make this my last question here. This one's more of a big picture. Well, last two questions. I know you got to go. The Nike deal that happened this year, the gear that came out. They only did the jerseys this time around. I was expecting the dope shorts for all the City and Rebel editions and all that kind of stuff like that. The Phoenix Mercury shorts are amazing with the flames on the side. I don't know why the shorts were not sold for all the teams, but hey, we'll move on. I'll get over it at some point. Not right now, but I'll get over it. But nonetheless, the Nike deal, did you see that as like a beacon of kind of the WNBA taking another major step forward as in terms of like becoming a more mainstream league, in terms of more people getting eyes on it, in terms of and combining that with the fact that it was on ESPN yesterday, it's going to be on ESPN today. A lot of people, it's more accessible than it ever has been. The athletes who are involved in the WNBA are popular on social media across the board, so they can sell jerseys better than they ever have before. Did you, when you saw the Nike deal, did you only see positives of it? Did you see any negatives about it? And then I got another question about Sabrina Ionescu after this.
No, I saw positives. It's just another step in the right direction. And I think what it's showing is that Nike made those three different jerseys for each team, and then people were buying them. People want jersey. We've been clamoring it for years, right? Nike finally did it, and now they're seeing that. Oh yeah, I guess this is a good idea. It's beneficial for the league. It's beneficial for us. They're seeing the return, the ROI, as people like to point out. And so I think that's just the start. I mean, I could see multiple, jerseys come out from this as a result, and other, like you mentioned, shorts, other articles of clothing. I'm hoping there's like some sneaker ideas in the works with certain individuals in the league who deserve to have their own name brand.
Who's the top of the signature sneaker list for you? I know Elena Delle Donne's got hers, and yeah.
Well, I mean, God, we have multiple players, right? I know Breanna Stewart's coming out with hers soon with Puma. But yeah, I mean, Asia Wilson, I think, is just one that you can't go wrong with.
No doubt. When you have a statue at your school and you're under the age of 25, you probably have done some pretty amazing stuff. So
yeah, she's in the prime of her career. It would be an awesome time to do that. She would be the top for me on my list. But yeah, I think it's great, and I think other companies, like you just had Dick's Sporting Good, I think came out recently, and they are now our official sponsor of the WNBA, and will sell the jerseys and stuff in their stores. So once you see other companies start doing it, you're like, oh, well, okay, if it's working for them, maybe it'll work for us. I mean, that's all that really needed to start happening, and hopefully we'll see more.
Yeah, here's hoping for that as well. And one more question. So Sabrina, 2 years into the league, first year was completely derailed by the nastiest ankle sprain of the decade, or the century, if you will. And then the second year around, they squeak into the playoffs and then get kind of swept out pretty quickly in one of the single elimination games. I mean, her basically being the cornerstone of the New York Liberty rebuilding. How long do you think this process is going to take? Because I feel like if there's one person who has a ton of attention, especially considering her relationship to one of the greatest basketball players of all time, Sabrina Ionescu blowing up is going to be huge for the WNBA, especially considering she has the skill and the ability to be able to become a superstar at the same level as the Asia Wilsons and the Liz Cambages, the Brittany Griners out there in the world, and the Candace Parkers, and to see her young career kind of get off to this kind of start, do you feel like that's expected in the WNBA because so many teams are so stacked, or is it something to be concerned about?
No, I think people expected a lot of Sabrina because of what she accomplished in college, and you can't. I mean, there are some players who take that. You look at Taurasi, who just take that right into the next step, and boom, it's Candace Parker getting Rookie of the Year and MVP in the same season, who can just do that, just like seamlessly. Sabrina just has having a different route, and I don't think the injury helped. She was off to a really great start in 2020, and that was just unfortunate. And I think you saw some effects of that this season, of the injury and just being out of basketball for a season. But I think she ended on a really positive note. She's the face of the New York Liberty franchise. That's why they drafted her number 1 overall. That is why they have put all this investment behind her. And I think the other players on that team, Benai Jelani, who is just also an incredible player, and was having an MVP season in the first half of the season. They have a great core team right now, and it can only go up from there. And I think we'll continue to see Sabrina get better. And I think she has her own expectations, on herself, let alone fan expectations. So she has that Mamba mentality, like you mentioned, her tie to Kobe Bryant. So I can only see her just, getting better and better.
One last question. You're part of the Bills Mafia. Have you gone through a table?
No. That's the one thing that I will never do, and that I just will never understand why it's still a thing. It was a thing when the Bills were bad, right?
Right. Because it was just
in the parking lot and just needed something to entertain themselves. So one guy goes through a table, and then it becomes a thing. But now it's like still tied to our fan base.
So they stopped doing the ketchup and mustard thing. They stopped doing the ketchup and mustard thing in the parking lot too. So maybe as they get closer, you get to the AFC Championship game, you win a Super Bowl perhaps this year. They stop doing the tables too, and I feel like it becomes a part of the thing.
I think the table thing will always be part of it. For some odd reason, it's it's not my thing. I never understood it. But yeah, I'm a huge Bills fan. I love the Bills. They're having a great season so far.
And to your credit, I've seen about 5 or 6 of those videos when the table breaking goes wrong, when the dudes like jumped off the RV together and they both missed and they just landed flat on the concrete. The dude that tried to do it off of like a sled. I've seen one guy get like DDT'd into one of them and they completely missed the table, so it's just his head smashing on the concrete. All the reasons to not throw your body through a table are right there in front of you, and I feel like Bills fans just ignore them. Luckily for us, we have a lovely and intelligent Bulls fan on the show here for the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. Lyndsey, The Athletic, where you write for, you can actually follow Lyndsey in the app if you're an Athletic subscriber. So every time she posts something, it comes to like your feed like a notification. So do that as well. Just Women's Sports, follow them on Twitter and all the social media accounts. Follow Lyndsey at what is it? What are we going here? Okay. How are we pronouncing Dark? Is it D'Arcangelo on Twitter or is it D'Arcangelo? Okay.
It's D'Arcangelo on Twitter. DARCANGEL 21.
There you go. Follow her on there for all the WNBA drama as everything goes on. The finals are just around the corner. Get ready for that. Please tell people how to find your book.
Yeah, that's right. You asked me about that at the top of this, and I totally glossed over the question. Yeah, you can get it anywhere. Pre-orders are available now. It comes out November 2nd. And again, it's called Hail Mary, the Rise and Fall of the National Women's Football League.
Thank you for joining us, Lyndsey. Thank you so much for your insight, and hopefully will not be the last time. I would love to talk to you after the champion has been crowned and how and your feelings about the season overall. Appreciate it.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Thank you very much. there we have it.